I think we'll bring this meeting to order now. I think everybody's had an opportunity to review the agenda. We acknowledge that this meeting is being held in the traditional territory of our friends and neighbors and our Treaty 8 partners of the Fort Nelson First Nation as well as the Prophet River First Nation. We recognize our treaty. We recognize the rights within that treaty. Please be advised that today's meeting is available for the public to attend virtually and is being streamed and recorded. Any additions to today's committee of the whole meeting? Okay, is there any public online that might want to speak? No. Okay, thank you. Everybody's okay with the agenda the way it is? Good. Okay, so that brings us to reports. Committee of the whole report 2125 with a summary of feedback for our draft government transfers policy. So I will hand it over to staff who will review this with us.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you. So right from the start, I want to acknowledge the time and resources that folks have put into this process, namely those that met with us and contributed feedback. Understanding that capacity for most of our organizations out there is light, and many of them are working in a volunteer capacity. So really, truly appreciate the time that was taken to do that. And then also, obviously, council's participation. There were a lot of evenings and weekends spent gathering feedback, and then the staff as well within the organization who pitched in to help this come to where we've been able to get it. So as the report reflects, council's last kind of working meeting around the development of the policy and our approach occurred in July. And staff was left with the task of looking to our community for some feedback to be able to bring back to council those thoughts. The main audience, of course, was those directly impacted or potentially directly impacted by this policy, which are the not-for-profits operating in the community and delivering services that complement or help advance council strategic priorities. So we did some direct invitations and made the offer to attend board meetings one-to-one. So once we'd completed all those, so there was, I think, 12 groups were directly approached. We were able to accomplish 10. We had one decline the request, and they noted that they're doing everything they can with what they've got, and they didn't see a immediate need for more funding, which was not a bad problem to have. And then we had one with no response. So we'll continue to work at ensuring that those folks have an opportunity to ask questions and receive answers. And then we actually have one more set up for Monday, which if there's anything that vastly differs from what we've heard, we'll ensure that that's fed back to council as well. So we open conversations with folks to introduce the draft policy in its current state, answer any questions or clarify anything that groups might have, and then openly gather some feedback around questions that we thought would be helpful to kind of gain an understanding of where groups may feel that the draft policy is hitting the mark or not. So those are summarized in the report there. So the themes that emerged may not be overly surprising. So one of the questions we were asking was kind of what groups and the community felt. So I should clarify. So we haven't done a full public consultation, that is like a public survey. But that said, there was feedback that came out of our discussions with organizations that certainly reflected a public view. Because undeniably each person representing an organization is also a taxpayer. So it was nice to kind of hear folks speaking with both hats. So we were asking about kind of that value of having a formal, transparent process, and that being a primary goal of the policy as it was written. So throughout all of the groups, that was kind of an agreed need or an agreed desire. So they talked about, you know, an appreciation for structure and approach of fairness, transparency, accountability for how funds are spent, and then having the ability for an objective view in reviewing the applications. Many talked about appreciating that this would give a clear pathway for groups who may not be accessing municipal funding today to approach the municipality for funding considerations in the future. Yeah, and so I mentioned it as well, but having that appreciation for transparency from a taxpayer's perspective. So that was brought up on a couple of occasions in different meetings as well. They appreciated that it gave council an ability to assess applications on an objective basis with a consistent kind of method to review applications moving forward. There were concerns expressed about potential conflict of interest. So having, being a small community, people wear many hats. And there was, that was one of the concerns that was relayed in a meeting about staff's involvement in reviewing applications and then also council's approval of applications.
So that's the first place I have a bullet. So,
Yeah, interrupt and please.
yeah, so I didn't know how you wanted to handle today.
Let's-
If each of these comments is, you know, because you've just, as I read it, you've just really gathered them.
Yep.
You're not drawing any judgment on them with respect to whether they apply, they don't apply,
Yep.
whether whether or not the policy needs to be adjusted because of it.
Mhm.
So I just wasn't sure what you wanted out of today's meeting. Is it for us to analyze each of these and say whether we want to see a change in the draft policy? Is that because of any particular comment that may have come through?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's a really valuable, that would be valuable from our perspective. So we didn't, you're right, we didn't see it as our role to evaluate the merits of any given comment. It was, you know, we were feeding it back what we heard. So absolutely, I'd appreciate, I think we'd all appreciate further direction from council.
Now, with respect to this one, I mean, I made the comment first that we probably should be putting something somewhere about conflict of interest because of the perception and actual, you know, there's actual conflict of interest around the table with many of us with respect to this. So, but I see at the end, you said as a recommendation that you think that should be there. But in this particular case, it's the sub-bullet, the concerns about the broadness of the council's strategic priorities in relation to the potential eligible projects. So how did that?
It wasn't a sub-bullet, that's a formatting error.
Oh, that's just a formatting error?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, okay, so that didn't apply to the conflict
No,
of
not
interest.
to the one
Okay.
above. That was, it should have been its own bullet.
Okay. So in that they're too broad? So that,
Yeah, so one of the comments was that the council strategic priorities are broad in nature and there was, there might be a challenge in groups identifying what particular project might be eligible given the breadth of the priorities as they're described in the plan. So I think, and maybe it's, it could be two sides of the same coin. Yeah,
that one could go both ways.
yes, exactly.
Is it, so that's an evaluation, a concern around evaluation of any particular application is what that's all about. Is that it? Yeah, I agree with you guys. You know, you right away, you said, well, it could swing both ways, right? That kind of a.
Beneficial.
Yeah, because sometimes if, yeah, you know, you might see the benefit and you might be able to fit it in. If it's, that's what I'm looking for. If it's a stretch, maybe. Right, if they see some value. Okay, yeah, I just had that question about the way it was formatted then, and so. Yeah, I'm good with that. I think that could go both ways, and I don't know that changing anything would help.
I think depending on the council at the time with their strategic priorities, where they look at ours currently, they might be a little bit more vague because we kind of need to be, we're looking at everything we can to be prosperous. So you don't really want to, you know, pigeonhole yourself in to a strategic plan that needs to evolve. So maybe in future councils, they might be more specific. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want me to go on?
Yes, please.
Okay.
So,
There was a specific comment about the thought that PACs and schools be excluded as eligible applicants.
so specifically to exclude them,
Mhm. And I
not
can't,
just to leave it open.
right. I don't know what the rationale was or if there was any given, but that was one of the feedback pieces. of
Are any
feedback.
of them registered though? They're
No,
not, right? They don't
No.
fit the
so
criteria.
it's a mute, that's
Yeah.
a mute point because the policy says you have to be a not-for-profit in good standing, and PACs and schools are not for profit. They're not registered not for.
But if they partnered with a registered non-for-profit, right?
Right, yeah,
Then
yeah.
you're eligible. Okay.
Yeah, I'm good with that, I think. Yeah, I think our eligibility criteria cover that. Yeah, okay, good.
There were some concerns that the policy as written could be interpreted and applied in an overly restrictive way, particularly around relation to funding eligibility. So this was around, and it might have been addressed later on. Yeah, so we also kind of referred to this within the funding levels and reserve and formula concerns. So we can carry on or we can talk about it now. It's up to you.
I'm good carrying on.
Okay. So at several meetings, there were concerns about the draft timelines proposed in terms of a September deadline for those highest level of funding requests, simply because many of the organizations' year ends wouldn't support providing the most recent or the current year end, I guess, or the current financial statements for that coming year's application. So there's a couple ways that we might be able to address that. So I think in most cases, we explained that we'd thought about the timelines for applications based on our budget preparations, but we know that not everybody operates on a calendar year like we do. So one of the potential solutions would be to just accept the most recent completed financial statements. So for example, if you're a group whose year end is September and you're applying for the future years, you would just give us the prior year's financial statements because they'd be complete and adopted. Understanding that year to year, there's obviously going to be some variation, but that's one potential solution. And Tony confirmed that would be acceptable, at least from a analysis perspective.
Yeah, so I have a comment here unless. Okay, so my first comment is that I agree that we should take the initial application. But our budget process is 5 months long. And there isn't any reason, I don't think, why they can't submit this year's completed. You know, they can put the first one in the initial application, we can start looking at it. And then once their year end is complete, they can submit it as part of the application. It's surely going to get to us before our final decision, which gives us the ability to evaluate the now as opposed to the last year. So, Tony, I don't know if that adds a whole bunch to your workload or not. You know, but I see that, yeah, get your application in with last year's stuff. We'll start to look at it, but then update it as soon as your end's completed.
Well, there is that. There's also the opportunity to have them provide it when they're doing their year-end reporting. So that we do have 2 touch points where that could happen. So for instance, when 2025 wraps up, their year-end reporting would include their financials for that year to support their spends. So we could utilize, we could incorporate it at time of application and supplementary at time of final report.
I'm just trying, I see it, John. I'm just want to carry this thought through till I'm done. I'm just, wondering how. I mean, anybody that I heard said that their year ends were right there in the fall. Like, they weren't, right? So why wouldn't we want the most up to date? And just get them to submit it. I didn't hear anybody who said like their year end was in June or July, where they could submit it to us and we could hold it until the next.
Hmm.
And I certainly don't think I want to be looking at a year ago, or it's not, wouldn't be a full year, obviously, because, but if they're in September and we're starting to get the binders in January, you know, I sure would like to see that that stuff is included somehow for me. I just don't see how accepting them, even if they did finish in June or July of 2025. Well, I guess that would be the most recent anyway, so I guess we'd have to accept that, I suppose. Okay, yeah, I just want to talk it through myself. Go ahead, John.
Oh, go ahead, Tony, please.
No, I was just going to comment, certainly, that's something that we can address within service contracts as we move forward as well.
Go ahead, John.
My thoughts from some of the feedback is that perhaps that September deadline might be a little bit early before the prospective nonprofits know the full impact of the year for them. So to get that initial application early would be a good thing, so that we're prepared as we can be for our budget process. But if they have a reporting requirement after that, and perhaps the rest of the year, the year's financials impact what they might have asked for on their original application, I'm wondering if there's an opportunity, if they have post-reporting requirements before we go through our process, can they amend their application? Like, let's say they need $5,000 less by the time we get to January, when their year end is done and something has surprised them and they want to amend it to be less. Is there a way to do that for them?
What say you, Tony?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I really think that we're going to be working more closely with the groups regardless, so that as their year-end reporting is coming in, we want to make sure that everyone around the table, the group and council, has that ability to be successful in the next year. We will have to pull the pin at some point
At
on
some
a
point.
date, but I think we can certainly include that ability for flexibility to know that we can work with the groups in that manner.
And what type of documentation would be acceptable to come with the application form?
Yeah, so as I'm the side of the right or left side of my brain is trying to process what that looks like, but in terms of their year-end reconciliation or reporting with us, what we can do is we can incorporate a section that speaks to their next year's budget request, so that they have that opportunity to proactively look at it, and we also have the opportunity for it to be identified.
You had something on it. Go ahead.
Okay. So just to expand on this conversation a little bit, so what I heard was that the beginning of September was too soon for most of the groups that I attended. In that they're just, some of them are getting over their busiest summer, some, busiest season, some of them are, on holidays, like that kind of a thing. So they were really hoping towards the end of September would give them a little bit grace. Like, and I'm just talking for the application process now, not the financial document. So yeah, so that's what I heard. And then I'm just wondering, in terms of the financial documents, if an organization applies in September, whatever date we choose, and then the most recent financial documentation is included at that point, and then the the year end or the completed financial report is then submitted once that's completed, right? So that's what I think I heard here. Is that what everybody else heard? Yeah. Right, so, okay, so that original application still has to include some sort of financial documentation, and I would propose that it's the last. Is it approved financial statement, whatever we decide that is gonna look like, right? Because there was what I heard from some of the groups is that having that, is it a certified, what's the word for the certified financial audits? Thank you, yeah, that is very expensive. And so there was a couple of groups and we had a really great discussion about what could be used in place of that. And I think, Tony, you had some words about what documents could be included that didn't include is it a statement of, what was it
It's a
called?
statement of interim, it's an interim statement.
Oh, what is it, John? Notice to reader.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that it isn't a third party that's looking over the books, but it isn't the audit, so it's not quite so expensive.
Right. And I think Jaylene could confirm that we have got information within the package that identifies that that statement is created by an independent. We're not saying the word audit.
Right.
Although if we get into a situation with a group that we believe an audit might be required, that would be something that we would discuss with them at the time we're signing the funding agreement with them.
And I think I read somewhere that if the NRM decided at that point that an audit was required, that it would be at our cost, at the NRM's cost, right? I
That's
read that
right.
in the, okay. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
so it was just notice to reader because I did hear from more than one group that financial audit is very expensive and unless they're gonna ask for more money, and then what's the point of that if the notice to reader does the same thing? Thank you.
Yeah, it doesn't quite do the same thing,
Well-
right? It's an independent review of the books is essentially what we're looking for. And there's different levels of that, you know, when you go notice to reader, full audit, and something in between there too, I think.
Yes.
You know, that to me is depending on the funding level that, right, the amount of money that we're actually that we're giving to a particular group. I mean, somebody at 15,000, I certainly wouldn't expect them to have any of that done. I would be comfortable at that level with, you know, with their own, what their own bookkeeping program, you know, the software kicks out. But at some level, we have to be comfortable, you know, at some level in the funding up to the max. We've got to be comfortable that the money is being spent, used the way we want it to be spent. And then, you know, so an independent review needs to be done on that, whether it's a notice to reader at the lower levels or whether it's an audit at the higher levels, or if we choose to audit them, we've got to be transparent, letting them know in the funding agreement that that's potentially the case. And if we have to write in there that we'll pay for it, then so be it. That doesn't have to be part of, that can be added on when you'd say to them, we would like your books audited for whatever reason.
Okay, but what I'm hearing you say that we should have a discussion about at what point in time it's a notice to reader or what it just like accounting software, notice to reader, and then a full audit or an audit, I wouldn't say
Yeah.
full, and then an audit. So
Yeah.
we should at some point in time have a discussion as to what those points are.
Right.
Right?
At what funding levels would we expect those things to be part of the funding agreement?
Right.
I think we need to have that
Okay.
discussion some point, and everybody should go away because we're each gonna have our own tolerance levels, I guess, when it comes to what financials we would expect, depending on how much money we're giving away.
If
My
I
thought.
may.
Yes, please, Tony.
One of the groups that we've met with more recently actually indicated that for some of the organizations, a pre-developed set of templates for creating a budget would be extremely useful. So what I'm envisioning is that we have the ability to put together that type of package that allows a group to see what that flow of data is, what we need when their application comes in, what we're looking for when their final report comes in. When are those types of reports due? And what are those types of reports, so that we can sit around together and understand what those metrics are.
Yeah, and they'll be consistent, right? It'll
Absolutely.
be consistent, yeah.
So one of-
Absolutely.
One of the comments with one of the groups was that for provincial purposes, the funding that they're applying for, if they have a budget, if they have a operating or an organizational budget of $1 million, they're required to have audited financial statements. So it might not be the case that the funding they're seeking from us triggers that. Maybe it's what their overall program is, because if it's a exercise they're already undertaking and we have the ability to benefit at no additional cost with that, the value of the information they're preparing for other funders, it'd be wonderful to do that. But we don't, I'm hearing we don't want to imply an additional burden where it doesn't already exist.
Depending on
So,
the funding level.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I read that in here too somewhere under, I don't know if it was under collaboration or whatever about templates, so, yeah. Yep. Oh, go ahead. You're talking, your hand up.
Yeah, and just to follow up to Jaylene's comment, maybe wording that if they are already conducting audits, that the municipality would be privy to it. If it already exists. If there is one, we need to see it. So.
Yeah.
Okay, yep, that covers that.
Sorry, I'm jumping back and forth between my notes and this report. Um, so okay, so the reporting requirement to some appeared potentially to be onerous. And they were hoping that there might be some ability to just provide reports that they're already creating out of their own systems. So certainly for consideration, that's the way we do it today. But I think what we've heard as we've developed this policy is that for review purposes, it's very helpful to be able to take an apples to apples look at how expenses and revenues are classified and presented. But that said, one mitigation strategy might be, like Tony said, is to provide templates. So it's easy enough based on if your profit loss looks like X, this is what we'd be looking for. So you can kind of translate without too much additional work. And then we did hear too that with this being an annual funding program, it might create challenges for groups who do their planning as a multi-year exercise. I'm not sure that that differs vastly from how we do it now, in that each funding year is a separate funding year. So that's not to say that this in the future may not end up being a multi-year commitment, but that's how this type of program is operated, or at least the grants to groups program has been an annual program for quite some
Go
time.
ahead, John.
Yeah, I think with the grants to groups, they are required to submit a 5-year capital plan and possibly even a projection on operations. Is there anything in the new policy that has anything more forward looking than just the year ahead?
No.
Not at this point. We know that as we go forward, we can work with groups for a consistent forward-looking process. But in order to roll it out in a consistent manner, at this point, we wanted to be able to standardize it just to that year that we approve. We would encourage groups to have that forward-looking preparation in terms of their budgeting, and certainly would provide assistance if we could in getting them on that track.
Once this is rolled out, as an annual, there's nothing saying that later the councils couldn't consider multi-year funding programs based on plans that might be accepted by the council from whoever puts it forward. Let's say somebody has a plan to do something in 3 years and here's how they want to step it out. That could be added to this policy, right? Because it's not written in stone, right? It's just, it's evolving. And so it's a living document. So sometime in the future, there could be an opportunity for councils to consider multi-year funding. Depending on the service or whatever project it is that the nonprofit would like to see come forward.
If I may,
Yeah.
certainly, we may see requests for capital projects that would span over a 2-year period
Oh.
in some instances. So, there, at that point, there would be the need to ensure that we provided funding over the course of that full term of that capital project, if it was approved.
Go ahead.
So there were two groups that I met with, and they both mentioned that, that they were required to submit a 5-year financial plan. And both groups were under the impression that when that yearly budget was approved, the council of the day was also approving that 5-year budget. And that's never been the way that I thought that we did it. So I guess I'm just want to make sure that we're asking for information that we need and that we're going to use, and not just something because it sounds good. Because let's not ask for a 5-year financial plan if we don't need that financial plan. And then let's make sure that the groups know that we're approving, that what we're approving, that it's clearly articulated.
That's probably a holdover from the fact that we have to do a 5-year financial plan.
Maybe.
And by asking your nonprofits for it, it gives you a bit of an idea what that line item in your own budget it looks like over the 5 years. But I agree with you, if we don't really need it. And if we have this program, we'll have a bit of an idea what our 5-year commitment to this program will be, right? Based on our own service level.
Well, I mean, I personally, just speaking for myself, I think, the next council might want to entertain a more longer term financial commitment to certain groups. And, like this is a policy. It's gonna roll out and then there'll be changes, I'm sure, right? As everybody works through the process, but for future councils, year 1 might be reviewing everything, and then year 2, maybe they're gonna approve year 2, 3 for the rest of their term, right? This is what we can commit to for this group, and then have a service agreement or whatever that happens to, so that those groups have some sort of a commitment from the council of the day that for the next 2 or 3 years, this is the funding envelope that we can confirm, so that they have some stability too. Because especially for the larger groups, right? It's really, really difficult to be planning when it's just year to year funding, you don't really even know what the next year is going to bring, right?
Yeah, and just to add to that, some of these organizations were requiring them to sign multi-year leases. So it would be helpful to know if the operation will be sustainable for the period of that lease. And they might also have contracts that could, span multiple years. So I think for sustainability, I'm just, sir.
Yeah, no, I'm just, no, I guess, sorry. I was just internalizing what you said around multi-year leases. Like how can an organization do that when the funding is annually? Like, I don't see how that is possible.
Right, but here we are with
So maybe that's something.
proposed leases on the table for multiple years, right? So
maybe that is something that has.
maybe
to be
those
addressed.
two things, funding and the lease, could be tied together somehow.
Yeah.
If there is a multiple, or
shorten
the lease.
Or, this lease is dependent on funding from the interim. If that changes, then the lease is null and void. Cause I don't think that we can hold any of our groups accountable to a lease when we are just approving funding annually. Like, that's pretty problematic. How can an organization sign a 5-year lease when they don't know what their funding is gonna be and we're the funder?
Well, considering the lease fees that we just determined that they're nominal, it's really not much of a deal.
But no, I mean, some of the larger ones have a considerable triple net to pay. And if you don't have funding, but the board of directors have assumed responsibility for that triple net for the 3 years with no funding coming in, like as a board of director, like I would be hesitant to sign anything like that. Because they are responsible.
Go ahead,
The way I
Councillor
see, the way I see this is, I think that it would be good to reference the idea of forward looking in this policy. Not to define it, but to reference that this is an ongoing discussion, because the level playing field is a very good starting point on a new policy where you have all parties have an annual reporting system and so on. But there's no doubt, both looking back and looking forward, that there are groups that will need that certainty in the forward looking. So I suggest that we just add the acknowledgement that we'll have that there's potential for forward looking in the funding model, but not define it yet, because we'll be back talking about this next year.
Some council will be, yeah.
Yeah, some.
And if I may, sorry, I mean, that's the thing. This is a policy that is gonna hopefully work for this council, but we have a year left on the term. The next council could come in and dramatically change it, right? Like that's the whole thing, so. Yeah.
But there's a baseline there now, right? All this work is, you're not doing it for nothing, even though,
No.
yeah, I mean, there's a baseline there to be worked with by future councils, so.
So the next theme was around the funding levels, the reserve to be established that would fund the fund. And the concerns about the formula. So unsurprisingly, we heard that a lot of organizations compete for the same amount of funds. And things like operational funds can be hard to obtain through grants, or that a grant is overly specific. And so unless you have a perfectly matching project, you're not eligible. Also, not surprisingly, heard that some organizations where they used to depend on things like Canada Summer Jobs funding, there's no longer certainty in that, as well as where fundraising used to be somewhat core to organizations. That's also proving to be less productive in terms of revenue, given our community's economy.
Kind of a message, isn't it?
Yep.
Fundraising is tight. Other organizations and levels of government are cutting back. Applies to us too. Why are we any different? Right? As an organization, why are we any different than all the rest that are hurting? So it's I think it's one of the reasons we're doing this is money's tight everywhere.
There was a concern expressed that tying the formula to fund the program based on the NRM's budget could create some instability, and that an arbitrary figure could be changed at any time. I don't have a whole lot of additional context around that one, so I'm not sure if that resonates with someone that might have been at that meeting. I didn't attend every single one.
Yeah, so I think essentially that means that any council at any time could change. So the funding pool formula, right? If whatever part of the budget we decide is going to be compared to for this pool of money, evaluated for this pool of money. And let's just say it's 5% of whatever it is that we pick, that you know, this pool of money will be 5% of some portion of our budget. That 5% could be changed by any council at any time, and that's their prerogative based on the circumstances of the day. And you know, although we're trying to get an idea of what the funding model looks like and what the sustainability level is, councils can change that based on conditions at any time in the future. So the point is valid. It's just there's nothing I think that we could do about it. That it is what it is. You try to determine what longevity looks like. You try to determine what sustainability looks like, and you do your best as an organization, and you pay the price at election time.
I think I was at that one, and there was no better idea as to how one does it, right? Like, and we had decided that it was gonna be a percentage of operating budget, was that? or what it was?
We haven't decided there
Okay,
yet, but
but-
there's a couple of different options.
That was an idea
Yeah.
that was in that presentation. Simply so that there would be a base, right? And
Yeah.
like you said, like any council can change, it's no different than now. We get all of the applications and you go, yeah or no, right?
Mhm.
So based on what, so. I don't know that there could ever be a hard and fast, like you could create a bylaw to say, okay, this is what it's going to be, but the next council comes in and changes the bylaw. So all you can do is, like you said, is be responsible for what this term, the term that you're on, and then see where it goes, right?
Councilor Roper?
Yep, and just about the funding cap, some of the feedback I heard was if we match what we gave last year and then for this year, we're opening up to everybody, is that not somewhat of an empty gesture to say, okay, well, if another nonprofit comes in, that means one of the current nonprofits has to lose. And I think that has potential to pit nonprofits against each other. So I think we need to come up with some sort of way to truly open it up for the nonprofits to make it more fair. And if we look back to the referendums, you'll see, let's say the museum, they were being funded on a minimum of $200,000 or the average rate of 27 cents per $1,000 of net taxable value of land. And so that's directly tied into the taxation that we take in. So if that goes down, then that maximum number goes down as well. But there is a minimum there to ensure continuity of the business. So perhaps there's a formula there where the total cap on the funding for all the nonprofits is somewhat higher than what we've been giving, but also tied to the land and the value of that land. And if that goes down, then all of the funding goes down, unless the next council or the council of the day decides to break away from that. If there's a dire circumstance where the funding is not there and more funding is needed, or that's just the way it is. But that would be tied to our value of the lands and the revenue coming in, so.
Right.
So you're talking about tied to the land assessment. What if it's a not-for-profit that doesn't have land?
Well, I think
So
we're talking overall, right?
Overall, like the value of the land that we collect taxes on.
Oh,
So if that goes down, then the cap of the nonprofit funding would go down. Is essentially, and that's, I mean, we've done it individually for these organizations traditionally through referendum, and they're all a little bit different. The theaters was 25 cents per $1,000, museum 27 cents. What would all of the nonprofit funding be? What would that number be? Let's say per $1,000. Set that, and then if that continues to go down, then that funding goes down. And that's just the way it is.
and then that's tied to the overall land assessment for the NRM in its entirety.
I believe so, if that's how I'm
Or
interpreting it.
that was, that was, yeah, so I'm just trying to figure out, right? So my understanding was it was just the Fort Nelson land. It wasn't the entire NRM, because we weren't an NRM, right? It was just the town of Fort Nelson
At that time.
at that time, at the time that assessment was. So it would, if we were.
So all that
I
industrial
like that idea actually, but yeah, okay. But it
It-
was
the-
just based on the land assessment
Yeah.
of the town, and now there it isn't a town.
So I think some of that did carry through because as far back as 2011, we received information at the theater that, that maximum levy had gone way through the roof. It was up towards $500,000. Where just a few years before, when it was the district, it was much lower. So I think that same line of thinking was carried through after the regional municipality became, or the district became a municipality. But I think if you take the overall value of the land now and apply that calculation in a broader sense for all the nonprofits, I think we'll get a number there that we can be fair and really take care of the nonprofits that we have now in the current form. And then if that goes down, then that's the warning to the nonprofits that the funding truly is running out and we have to reconsider.
So then how would you base a minimum then? Because the way that is worded, it's like 27 cents or whatever, but the Historical Society is always guaranteed the $200,000. So what would you base a minimum on?
Well, I mean, they're not guaranteed that $200,000. No one's guaranteed anything really, but it's a
But
guide.
the way the words are,
I would say that we're gonna have to set a minimum and then have a formula for a maximum. Based on the needs of the community now and possibly in the near future. And then when that does go down, if it does go down, then that funding gets reduced. If it goes up, then that formula still stays. And then we have the opportunity to fund more nonprofits if the economy does recover. So
you know, that's a really interesting idea, John. Thanks. Yep.
but I think that cap needs to be something that's not going to take one away from the other if someone else comes in, because I think the nonprofits would start to feel bad if this nonprofit got funding for this project, but at the expense of this one losing something. That would be a terrible situation, I think.
And I don't think that that's what the design of this, at least not from my perspective, it was never, the process wasn't intended to be negative for any group or to pit any one group against another. From my perspective, again, it was to open it up an avenue that any not-for-profit that's interested in getting funding could have, because that's what I heard over the years, right? This is like, well, how do we even do that? Well, there was no process. You have to go to council, right? So from my perspective, that's what I hope that we can gain from this, all of the work that we have done on this.
The other thing we do gain is we start to get a feel for the real need, right? Because we've opened it up, because we've gone to the nonprofits asking for their feedback. We've also informed them, I want to say educated, inform them of what potential is. So once we start in these transition years, 1-2 years, we'll start to see what the need is out there, or what the pent up need is. I guess that's for lack of a better word. And we'll have to see whether or not that's in the end a dollar value that we're prepared to spend as a council, and is it viable over the long term? What the pool looks like, what formula, because you're just talking about another formula is basically what to determine what the pool is. That still is that's something for us to have a discussion about yet. Because we haven't had that yet.
And I just wanted to add, sorry, Mayor, is that even with the formula that John just outlined, that's really piqued my interest, it's still arbitrary, the minimum and the maximum, so I think we're always going to get that feedback that, well, it's been set arbitrarily, right? Because there's always some of that.
Yeah.
No matter what formula is chosen.
Okay.
Just one comment is that while assessments are established by an independent agency, it's not always a true reflection, as we know, of what we're able to collect.
Yeah.
So, just food for thought. It's not, that doesn't mean it's money in the bank. So there can be a risk there.
Yeah. Where if you look at service levels, that's something that you're going to spend the money on. You've determined it as far as the municipal service levels go. Then you know that if those are starting to slide, because council says to staff, we need to start cutting services somewhere because we either raise taxes or we cut services. That's the only way we can make up a shortfall. Is by raising taxes or by cutting services, one or the other. And so then if the services are cut, then all of the services are cut. And you know that a year in advance, right? We know that in this year that we're going to ask staff to cut services next year. That gives then the nonprofits this year that they've already received, next year that we're talking about, and then we're saying you got to cut next year. So it's almost 3 years out when they start to realize that they might have to take 5%, 1%, 2%, whatever the council of the day says to staff. Our revenues are short, or our revenues are decreasing. And so therefore we need to start cutting services or raise taxes. And that's a council of the day decision. But if we're not in a position to be able to cut services, then we're not doing our job, preparing for, look what's happening around us. We have to have some vision with respect to the worst case scenario. So,
I'm not a fan of tying it to the service levels. And I just wanted to add that in terms of the assessment value, we know a year in advance that we are going to have to put I don't know, $3 million, call it a number. Because we know we're not gonna collect that $3 million, so you could still have that land assessment minus the $3 million or $10 million or whatever it is that we believe we're not gonna be able to collect. And then that's the figure and then the percentage of that. So I think that there's a way around that.
Right, John?
Yeah, and just some of the messaging we're giving is that, we're telling people the economy is suffering, so expect less in the future. Well, I would say that if we tie it to service levels that we decide to cut, that could create a cascading effect, of a dominoes effect almost, of services just being cut because this one was, and then all of a sudden we're tied to that. But if we actually go by the economy, by that value of the assessed land, whether it goes up or down, that's going to be our number, and that's what we're going to be able to sustain. And then that takes the bias out of the individual person to decide which level of service they want, because some people might not want this service where the community does. And yeah, I think it takes some of that conflict out of it and truly ties it to the economy. So
Is there a desire of council for kind of that combination of approaches to be brought back through the analysis and the formula? So that you can, so that you can run all of those methods and see what makes the most sense or what's most palatable.
Mm.
I think Tony had planned in future meetings to bring back that kind of analysis, because the methodology, while we understand there might be some more clarity that's required when it comes to presenting numbers. So if that kind of multitude of approaches can be brought back, if something that council wants to see, we can take that into consideration.
So I'm conscious of time. It's 5 now. We only planned an hour here, so. We're in the developmental stages, right? So we're not pressed to make a decision anytime soon. I mean, sooner, obviously, because we need to get the transition into place. We were hoping we get it done for this year, well, multiple years before. But I mean, we're there now where we're almost into a transition year. So how quickly there's still 3 pages of notes here that we have. I mean, I think it's been a good conversation.
Mhm.
So I'd
Yeah.
like to
I'm
continue.
really appreciating the dialogue and like the fulsome conversation, everybody around the table, and it's been really respectful. And yeah, I am really appreciating this dialogue, and I don't want to hurry it. So I think we have time, and if we can get together at another time to go through the rest of it, that would be my preference.
John, go ahead.
yeah, I'm also very happy with the discussions. I think this really highlights the benefit of the committee of the whole format, is that we're not bound to Robert's rules and we can have a discussion instead of just saying 1 or 2 things and then having to move on. So that's great. But yeah, I agree. We have a little bit of time. We want to get this right. We want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the community. We've got some really good feedback here, and I'm really happy with this report. It does accurately reflect all the things that I've been hearing. So I think we have everything in front of us. We're well ahead, and I think maybe 1 or 2 more of these. Hopefully 1, but I think we'll get to the end of that list and have some finalization. It would be good.
All right, so let's plan to have another meeting next week.
Sure.
Is everybody in town next week? Okay, well, let's try to find a date. That's one of the days next week that we can
Sure.
get together.
So does noon work for everybody, or is after work better, or what works better for everybody?
Hmm?
Hands on, yeah.
Fridays are good for me.
They are.
They are, yeah. Don't base it just on.
Well, I think it's really important that we're all at the table, so because there's missing pieces when we're not all here, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's why we're getting so much out of this one, because we haven't been all of us together. Yeah, so it's really important that everybody is here. So,
Agreed. Okay, so you'll send us some dates. Then we'll do our best to accommodate them. Thank you, everybody. That was a good discussion. So we will, we'll close this meeting, we'll adjourn this meeting and call up another one. Thank you, everybody.